These sound bites are brought to you by 365daysofnutrition.com. Yet again, in Covid times, we are beleaguered by podcast gremlins, so editing the Dalek out of this week's podcast was a great challenge. We used to sit round a kitchen table and enjoy a cup of tea and a chat, and I can't wait to get back to those times. That aside, it is always so interesting talking to Victoria Mann. She's knowledgeable and sensible, and as a qualified dietitian offers great solutions to better nutrition. We covered today setting plans and goals for your nutrition and how we can make that easier for ourselves and make more sense of it all. Welcome for the second time, Victoria Mann from Oakman. Finish the last bit off for me.
Oakman Nutrition and Fitness.
That's exactly right. You had to get that bit wrong. So, Victoria, it's just fantastic to have you back. And last time we spoke, I think we were right at the beginning of the COVID situation. So we've all been through, or are going still through that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have you back today because during the 365 nutrition, the messages that people get every day, we did a whole week on planning. I gave people planners and water planner and working out your nutrition. So we were eating better across the board. There was a whole load of different things in there for the week. And I thought it'd be really fantastic to have you back to talk about how to plan and why it's important to plan your nutrition, because I've had a shopping list since I was in my 20s. I've always done it and planned my meals out. But do I plan my nutrition? I wouldn't say I give it too much thought. I just plan things that I know I'm going to enjoy. So I just wondered if you could fill in the gaps for us and, perhaps we can get better at doing that for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. So planning has a massive impact on how likely we are to meet our goals. So it's thinking about what are your short, medium and long-term goals? So what is it overall that you're trying to achieve? And then breaking that back down and thinking, if I was to say to you in a month's time, have you met your goals? What would that look like to you? And what would you want to be able to tell me that you've done? And then a kind of midpoint, so, in 3-6 months time. And then it's thinking about breaking that back down. And then your plan for your week, does that plan meet and contribute to these short, medium and long-term goals? So it might be something, before we've talked about increasing the variety of fruits and vegetables you're having. That might be one of your short-term goals. So then in your planning for that week, it's looking across your shopping list, across your meal plans and thinking, have I managed to fit those in each day? So is what I'm buying this week in my food shop and what I'm doing on my online shop, which is what quite a lot of people are doing at the moment, is that going to be contributing, or have I kind of just missed my goals for this week, and then replanning around that? As you say, a lot of us just kind of order food and plan based on what we like to eat, what's easy for the family, what time we've got, what's going to make everyone happy. But it's just taking that time and thinking, am I meeting my nutritional goals for the different food groups and for my specific goals at the moment as well?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly since I've been doing 365 for everybody, and I've heard this back from a lot of my customers as well, I wouldn't say that I've made a massive big change. I've made gradual changes, but actually that's what 365 days of nutrition is. It's gradual changes and learning. So if I look at my shopping list now, when I'm making it, I do make sure that I'm putting a different variety of veggie, because we're big broccoli heads in our house. My son, from the age of 3, it's the only way I could get him in from playing outside, was to tell him I've got a big plate of broccoli ready for him. So, but there is more veg than just broccoli. So it's good to kind of give yourself a heads up and just look at what vegetables you're ordering in. My daughter's vegetarian, so I tend to look at a really broad range now, whereas I don't think we probably did before. So it's just making incremental changes and knowing that you're aware and getting a bit more conscious of what you're shopping and how you're working things out.
Definitely. And looking across the food groups as well. So, have you got your proteins in there? Have you got a variety of different proteins? Have you got some sources of omega-3, some oily fish in there? Have you got the wide variety of fruits and vegetables, different whole grains? So have you got something from each of those food groups? Because it's very easy as well to come towards the end of the week and look in the fridge and you've got I don't know, chicken, but nothing to go with the chicken. And it's kind of, particularly towards the end of the week, that tends to be the case. So it's making sure that each of your meals, you've met those major food groups, and that will look after the macronutrients. And if you've done, if you've got appropriate portion sizes of each of those main food groups, the micronutrients will start to kind of look after themselves. And as long as you're getting the variety in over the week as well, and you've not got chicken for most of the week, making sure that you're getting some plant-based sources of protein, particularly if you've got someone who's vegetarian or vegan in the house. It's making sure that the substitutes that you're putting in are appropriate and containing the right range of nutrients as well.
Yeah. So I think on this shopping list situation that we sent out, I think it was week 34 I did that. It's useful to kind of break down and maybe into quarters the page and make sure that you've got each category taken care of. Weirdly, I think the carbs tend to take care of themselves, don't they?
Yeah, that is the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But equally making sure that you're getting a range of different carbohydrates in. And there's so many different grains available now. You can be using things like lentils and beans and things that are going to be a protein source as well as a carbohydrate source. So it's not just sticking to kind of pasta, bread, rice, and potatoes that quite often we get into a routine of having. It's trying to get a bit of variety in there as well, and the different types of grains contain a different amounts of the micronutrients. So mixing that up can be really beneficial as well in terms of the fibers that we're getting, as well as different proteins as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we cover in 365 is batch cooking. And so when you're talking about the end of the week, if you've done a really good, healthy set of batch cooking some weeks previously, you should always have something nutritious in your freezer, really, that you can fall back on.
Definitely. I think, we tend to get tired towards the end of the week if it's been a busy work week.
Some days are enough, aren't they?
Exactly.
Enough is enough. And the thinking about your nutrition sometimes is parked. And in actual fact, it's at that point that you really need it, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. It's those days that we're feeling run down and tired or stressed. And that's the days that it's really easy to kind of throw the towel in and say, let's just order a takeaway or get something out of the freezer that's not particularly healthy. But actually, as you say, if you've got those healthy meals already batch cooked and prepared, that's actually becomes the easiest option. And then it's providing you with much better nutrition and actually will help your recovery and help pick you back up rather than make you feel worse the next day.
Yeah, because I've got to say, as a youngster, I used to love the odd takeaway from time to time, but actually I can't stand them now. And I find it ever increasingly important to have a really good backup in the freezer. My daughter's the one that keeps me on track. She's a dancer and she's very mindful of how she eats, and she's got everything sorted out. And of course, with doing 365, she's really enjoyed listening and learning from that, and so she kind of keeps me guided. But if you've not got somebody like that in the house, it can be tricky to work it out for yourself.
Yeah, and in terms of making progress, that's one of the really important things as well. It's the views of the people around you. We know that if you've got if your family, for example, aren't particularly supportive of the change, or they aren't ready themselves to make changes, often people often unintentionally can sort of sabotage your efforts. And you come home and you're tired and they go, oh no, it's fine, we'll order a pizza. And you go, oh well, really, we probably shouldn't. And they go, no, we'll do it. And before you know it, you're sat down having it and it's not really what you wanted or needed.
And then you feel it's a double-edged sword, that, isn't it? Because you're not only getting the nutrients you need, but you're also mentally feeling battered about it, and that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you've got people in the household that are on board, and you can have those discussions and everybody's engaged with it, it just makes the whole process so much smoother and easier if everyone's with the same mindset of, we want to eat well, we want to make good choices. And yes, have treats and have things that you enjoy, but not things that you're going to sit there and think afterwards, I don't know why I did that, actually I feel really rubbish.
Yeah.
And that supportive environment is so important.
I think it's worth mentioning here as well. I'm talking about my family quite a lot today, where I normally never do, but it's a good example because you get so many different varieties and versions and choices and options from each person. But when my daughter wanted to go vegetarian, I just found it a step too far because I was obviously catering to a big meat-eating son as well.
Yeah.
But we worked out that if we edged towards it, and we had, so there we go, we did plan and we did have some goals. We kind of looked to get into an 80-20 situation, and then she could go 100%. And that was partly for me adapting, because you have, as a mother, got to take care of the whole family, and not everybody's on board with your decisions. So I now cook really great meals where I can adapt, or I can make a vegetarian version and pop some meat in for my son, or the other way around. But to make the change all at once can sometimes just be a little bit overwhelming when you've got everybody to think of. So
Definitely.
doing it in stages is a great way to achieve it, I think.
Absolutely. And particularly with something like going vegetarian, it does take some planning, because people often think of vegetarian and vegan diets as being, healthy and, and have a lot of connotations alongside it that are very positive. But often, if you make that decision very quickly and just take meat out and don't substitute it with the appropriate things,
you're left dangling, really.
Yeah, you can be left with a very unhealthy and very carbohydrate predominant diet and become deficient in a whole range of different micronutrients. So actually taking it a bit more steadily and taking that time to think about, well, okay, this meal isn't going to have beef mince in it, but what are we going to replace it with? Are we going to replace it with beans, or are we going to replace it with soya? Or and allowing yourself that time to kind of think through the process, rather than overnight saying, okay, well, yesterday we would have had a spaghetti bolognese with beef mince, and oh crikey, what are we going to have today? And historically, quite often we've seen, not so much these days because there's much more choice available, but we saw people going vegetarian, and instead of having a bolognese, for example, they were just having pasta and tomato sauce.
Which leaves you short on a lot of things there.
Exactly. Whereas now, luckily, we do have a lot more availability and choice in the supermarkets. But if you haven't taken that time to think about, what am I actually going to substitute this with, and is everyone else in the household, as you say, going to be happy with having a soya-based or bean-based dish instead, it can be quite a tricky transition.
It can. So I can understand quite clearly what the additional benefits are for planning, but I understand we've all got very different members in the household that we're catering to, really. But how do we overcome habits and hurdles that we've created for ourselves, let alone the fact it's quite a complex situation when you're trying to change your food. That's why I did 365. It's just a small step every single day, rather than, sometimes it's overwhelming. But over the years you can slap, I call it cladding on yourself, that your own beliefs that you've chosen to take on, and there it sits, and so some people absolutely say the chocolate, I love chocolate, but do they really? So how do you kind of overcome those kind of hurdles?
So I think it's, as we said right at the start, always having a clear goal in mind, because if you're trying to make changes, and those changes are difficult, if you haven't got some sort of outcome that you want to achieve from it, it starts to lose a bit of meaning. So it's got to be something that you see as worth the effort. So change is difficult. Any change in our life will always challenge us. And making changes to our food habits, when it might have been something we've done for years and years and years, can be really difficult. So we've got to have some sort of meaning behind it. There's got to be some purpose for doing it. And that purpose has got to be strong enough to outweigh the difficulty that it's going to cause us. So it's making
sure it's going to bring us more pleasure than pain. That's what we're after, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be worth the effort that you're putting in. So it's keeping your goals in mind and thinking when it's, challenging times, thinking, why am I doing this? What is it that I'm trying to get out of it? And keeping that end goal in sight. And for that reason, it's really important to break your goals down so that you've got some short-term goals so that you're achieving things. Because we're all very good at saying, oh, okay, well, I want to lose 2 stone. And actually that's really, really far away. And when you haven't lost 2 stone, that can be quite disheartening. But if you say, well, actually, like you've been doing with the daily updates, this week I want to achieve a much smaller goal, and you achieve that, you get that boost from it, and that kind of keeps you going, keeps you ticking over, and it stops the kind of overwhelming scenario where you're trying to get to that sort of end goal. And then it's thinking about kind of techniques that we put in place every day. So as you say, things like, or I'm a chocoholic. I'm, can't do without my chocolate bar in the evening. It's thinking about sort of more the rationale of why do you feel that you need that? What is it giving you? Is it that it gives you a bit of comfort? Is it that it's kind of your downtime at the end of the day? And quite often people say that, I get home from work and I have a glass of wine, and that kind of signals to me that that's the end of the work day, and I can relax. Whereas, what behaviours could you replace that with that were more helpful? Could you say, well, I finish my work day and I go for a walk, or I have a bath, or I, read a book for half an hour, and thinking about what are those food behaviours providing emotionally for you, and how could we replace those? Because quite often our food choices are tied up in a lot of emotion, and it's not just that you really like chocolate. It's that chocolate means something else to you.
Yeah, and it's a habit and a belief you've stuck on yourself, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And you've kind of labelled that, and the more you label yourself as that, the more ingrained that becomes in your mindset. And it's,
oftentimes I don't think, I'm saying people, but I'm just as guilty of it. You don't always know that you're doing it. You're not thinking consciously, are you?
Definitely. And that's where food diaries are really, really helpful, because even if we think we're on track, sometimes just taking stock of things and doing a food diary for a few days, you think, oh crikey, I hadn't realized I'd started doing that again. These little bits had crept in. And just the process of making yourself do a food diary can be really, really beneficial. You go, oh gosh, every evening at 8 o'clock I'm, my head's in the fridge and I'm trying to find something to have, and really, do I need to be eating something at 8 o'clock when I only had my dinner at 6:30? So it's that doing a food diary can be really useful to take stock again and reassess the situation.
Food diaries utterly tedious, but so enlightening.
Definitely. And I think, don't be thinking that you've got to do it for, even a whole week. Even just a couple of days is usually enough.
Shine a light on some pockets of bad behaviour or stuff that you're doing that you didn't know about.
Exactly. And as you say, we do things through habit a lot of the time. And quite often people get stuck and think, gosh, I feel like I'm doing all the right things, and why am I not getting to where I want to be? And it can be really frustrating. And it's not that they're lying to themselves. It's not that they're, lying to health professionals when you see a dietitian, or you speak to your GP. It's that you genuinely don't realise that you're doing these things. And I think that's a really big thing.
You don't know how to tackle them. If you don't know you're doing them, it's hard to know how to stop them, isn't it?
Exactly.
So Victoria, we've been chatting about chocolate, so let's just pick up on that. Including goal planning and the chocolate situation. If you were tackling sugar and you wanted to get rid of it, how would you goal plan that? If we just link that back to the first question about how we tackle a goal planning situation around eradicating sugar out of our lives, or at least cutting it down.
So sugar is one of those things that we develop a preference for. So the more sugar we have in our diet, the more we want it. The less we have it, the less of a sweet preference we have. And quite often we find, particularly, for example, if people have always had sugar in their tea, if you can gradually cut that down, actually over time, if you then give them the amount of sugar that they used to have in their tea,
Yeah, they can't
it tastes
handle
far too
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah. So sugar is one of those things that we do get used to, and the more we have it, the more we want it. So in terms of goal setting, what we want to do is really gradually reduce it down. I wouldn't recommend, getting up tomorrow morning and saying, right, that's it, I'm cutting out sugar completely. Because actually what we know is that when we do things like that, and we've all tried it in the past, all you can think about is that sugary thing that you really want to have, and that completely occupies your mind, and it becomes really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that depending on get where you are with your starting point. So that can be, as you say, with a food diary. It can be just going through your sort of typical day and think about how much sugar are you realistically having at the moment. I wouldn't ever say that you need to cut it out completely, but obviously it's about limiting it, and limiting particularly the free sugars, so your added sugars, and having your fruit sugars and the sugars that you find in milk are obviously much more in their natural state.
Yeah, rather than
and
having a
don't
big
have
thick chocolate bar. And
exactly. So don't have the same sort of negative health consequences. So get your starting point and think, okay, well, these are my main sources of free sugars and added sugars, whether that's in your tea, whether it's in your chocolate bar that you always have mid-afternoon, or whatever it might be, and then start gradually reducing it down. So think, week 1, I have 2 spoons of sugar in my tea. So week 1, I'm going to have 1.5, or I'm going to try a sweetener, or some small step to get you on your way, and then plan it out each week until you're getting to a level that you're happy with. So that it doesn't feel like you're completely depriving yourself, and it gives your taste buds a chance to adjust, so it never feels like you're you're making a huge step, and that feels too much.
Yeah, so you're just doing things gradually, pretty much like I do with the 365. So it's just a gradual
exactly.
Improvement, and before you know it, you've got rid of something that wasn't serving you very well.
Exactly. And I think it's about having some balance as well, so allowing yourself treats. So it's not saying, I'm never going to eat cake again, but it's saying, well, it's someone's birthday next week, so I'm going to have a small slice of cake, but I'm not going to have a piece of cake every lunchtime after my lunch. So it's about getting some balance. I think when we say we're going to cut something out completely, often that can be psychologically really difficult, and actually is much, much more difficult than saying I'm going to have it infrequently.
Yeah, and choosing your time to do it as well. I think if you're if we look at where we are right now in the middle of COVID, or we just started to lift restrictions a little bit, but I know a lot of people have been baking because you can't get flour or anything in the supermarkets. And actually I've been baking as well. I love baking. When I was going through my diagnosis of cancer, I used to get up at 5 a.m, bake a cake and take it on the ward with me and give it to patients or nurses or anybody in the neighbourhood. They were all sick of my cakes, I think, by the end of it. But there's just something really deeply satisfying about baking, and homely. It keeps you grounded. So I think, trying to cut that out, something that brings you a lot of mental satisfaction at a time like this, would be too tough in a way.
Definitely. And a lot of my clients have said the same thing. At the moment, small pleasures are really important.
They are,
we can't go out and do the things that we normally do. We can't see all of our friends and family, and actually things that bring us a bit of joy at the moment are really, really important. So I think it's definitely getting that balance. So it's, I'm going to do some baking, but maybe I'll drop some of it off to the neighbours, and I'll limit how much I have. So you can still get the pleasure from the activity, but you're not consuming all of the product.
Smell in the house is something. I go back to my childhood with my grandparents. One grandma in particular used to always be baking. I used to love walking through her front door and having that really deep, homely feel to her house.
It's a comfort, isn't it?
It really is. And it's the same actually. If you're baking if you eat all the cakes you made, you'd be absolutely piling the weight on, a bit like I am at the moment, to be fair. But the giving it away is as satisfying as the eating of it, I think, in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
So I think you've got to
can
kind of just look at different things that it can bring you, rather than just eating it all yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And there's substitutes that you can make as well. Making trying out some healthier recipes, and as you say, it's been a bit challenging to get flour in the supermarkets at the moment, so there's a lot of recipes out there for cakes with flour substitutes, and making some healthier
I've
bakes
been looking
as
at,
well.
my daughter's been,
So
she's gone up a level, she's going vegan rather than just vegetarian now, so I've been reading a lot of vegan cookbooks, and it's quite interesting actually, the different substitutes you can make.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so much choice out there now, and
Yeah,
it brings a new challenge to it as well. So whilst we'll have a little bit more time on our hands, it's
so just
yeah,
keeping
a new
along that
challenge.
theme, do you have your clients, and do you plan for holidays and things like that? Not that we're all getting very many of those this year, but do you bother planning for a holiday, or do you just go on holiday and
Yeah.
take the consequences and come back and pick up where you left off?
So it depends on the goal, really, and it depends on how much of a negative consequence we think it would have. So I'm a big believer in, we have to have treats, and we have to allow ourselves to enjoy things. And I think nobody should be going on holiday with the main mindset of, worrying about food, or being anxious about eating healthily, because I think we all need our downtime, and that's actually really beneficial in terms of our minds and our spirits. So for some clients, if it's not going to be particularly detrimental, most people, unless you're very lucky, your holidays make up a very, very small proportion of the year. So realistically, is it going to have that bigger impact on your overall goals? If it's not, then I would say go and enjoy yourself. I tend to say to people, enjoy it, but don't overindulge, because quite often, if you've been working really hard and you've got into the mindset of eating healthily, quite often it can then bring up a lot of emotions in terms of feeling guilty or feeling unwell the next day. So if you've worked really hard to cut out, say, really high fat foods, and you go on holiday and all you eat are really high fat, greasy foods, then actually that can ruin your next day. If you're planning a trip out the next day and your stomach's all over the place, that's actually going to have a negative consequence.
So Victoria, I know that fitness is hugely important to you, and for some people it's great that they've got that really solid into their daily pattern. For other people who struggle to get out and find fitness into their daily lives, how would you advise people to kickstart that off? Because I'm super keen, having gone through this diagnosis, to see people combine their mental health along with their nutritional health and their physical well-being, and it all plays a big part and kind of interlocks together.
I think it's, as you say, it's about finding how it can fit into your day. So it can feel really daunting if you're trying to increase your activity and you say, okay, so I don't go to the gym at all at the moment, I'm going to try and go to the gym 4 days a week.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's completely overwhelming, and it doesn't fit in with how your lifestyle is at the moment. So it's those small incremental steps that we always talk about, and it's what's achievable at the moment. Could you get off the bus a couple of stops early and walk the last bit to work? Could you park further away? And living in Oxford and the terrible parking and traffic situation, often it's quicker to park further out and walk in. So it's about starting to fit in those small bits. There's so many home workouts available now, and quite often if people are struggling for time, that's a really good starting point as well, because you can fit it in when it works for you in your day. So whether that's a quick 20 minutes at lunchtime, or whether that's in the evening or before everyone else gets up in the morning, it's about finding those little bits of the day that can be for you. And then you'll be surprised once people start to get into it. It's amazing. Often I have clients who start and say, oh, there's no way that I can see you more than once a week. I haven't got the time. And then they start getting into it, and then suddenly, oh well, actually I could fit in maybe twice a week, and then they really start to enjoy it and see the benefits
it's the enjoyment factor, isn't it, that kicks in then, and then you can't get enough of it in a way.
Yeah, and I think often it's quite daunting to start with, as you say, but once you start to enjoy it and see the benefits, it becomes something that you want to fit into your day rather than you're having to fit into your day.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's really the tipping point in terms of it becoming part of your routine and really enjoying it and reaping the benefits from it.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think that kind of wraps up our conversation, and hopefully if we speak in the future, we're not going to be in the middle of a COVID situation. But
that would be nice.
It's the adapting and making you being aware of what's going on in your life, because if you just look at the times we're in now, how different they are to when we first spoke, how things are changing, and you have to go with that flow, you have to go with that change and adapt and swerve. And
absolutely,
I've been shielding for 3 months, so I found that very difficult. I've been exercising at home, but it's not been the same, and I have put weight on, but I've decided to be easy on myself about it. It'll come off now I'm back out again, and just find some ways you can do a little bit of extra exercise, going up and down the stairs a bit more or whatever it is. So you have got to go with the changes that come in your life, whatever they may be.
Definitely.
So yeah,
and I think not being too hard on yourself, as you say. I've had a lot of phone calls from clients saying like, oh gosh, it's all gone wrong, and and it's everything's changed for so many people. Our whole lifestyle's changed.
I think
overnight,
everything does feel like it's going wrong to start with, until you start to find your way through, and then you think, okay, yeah, definitely. I can make that work in this way. And when you feel the skid coming, is not to panic and just think, okay, let's just ride with this a bit and see where we're heading. I learned a lot of that through going through cancer, of course. The reason I started writing 365 is because I just don't want people to have to go through a diagnosis to start to understand how to treat themselves better, really.
Yeah, it's allowing yourself that headspace sometimes, isn't it? And just saying, okay, this is happening, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I'm still here, and I'm doing my best. I'm showing up for myself every day in whatever way that might be, and
definitely.
I started to do that work-wise, was just to show up for myself every day and personally, and then that's when the nutrition came in. I thought, well, I can do better for myself. I need to do a little bit better for myself to make this work. And so how can I show up every day? And that's where I thought, okay, I do write for 365 days of breast cancer. Let's do the same for nutrition, so that it's not too overwhelming, and just one little part a day is not too, it's not too onerous. You can take that on, can't you?
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't feel that you're going to struggle to do that. It feels like something that you can just slowly implement and be heading in the right direction.
Well, that's been a really good, positive conversation today, so I'm very grateful to have you on board as always, and I hope that things can get back to normal for us both very soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thanks
it's
so
been
much,
great.
Victoria.
No problem at all. Take care.
If you like this soundbite from 365 days of nutrition.com, comment on it, like it, or share it.